Hello.
Hi. Delighted to meet you, sir. I watched a little bit of one of your interviews, but what really got me hooked on who you are is that interview that you gave with ABC, I believe, when you were marketing your book. My God, I said to your producer, I love this man. I don't even know you.
Well, that's great. Who are you? What's your name?
That is I got to tell you, that is the exact same question that Steve Croft started his interview with me. That was 5 years ago. Who are you? And sometimes I have to tell you, I have questions as to who I really am because I have lived at least two lives. I have a German name and I have an English name. I won't tell you my English name right now because that's a giveaway.
So tell me your German name.
And that is very difficult to pronounce for anybody but Germans. It's Albrecht Dittrich. Say that 3 times really fast.
and Albrecht Dietrich, tell me your story. Because it's a kind of weird, obviously this is the concept. You know a little bit about me, yes, and I know nothing about you, which is fine.
Well, don't you have a goal to sort of figure it out in 20 minutes or something? I promise I won't play cat and mouse, but I will be slightly opaque. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
So as you may be able to determine, I was born in Germany. Born, raised, educated in Germany. I lived my first 26 years in Germany, and then I came to the United States. And when people ask me, so how did that happen? I'm answering a question that you should have asked. And my answer is I had some help from the government. Now, the question should be, so which government, the German or the American? No, it was the government of the Soviet Union. Now you have probably some kind of an idea how this all evolves.
So you were born in Germany.
Yes, sir.
The government of the Soviet Union helped you move to America.
That's correct. That is absolutely 100% correct.
When did you move to America?
1978.
Which means, if my math is correct, you were born in 1952.
49.
49?
Yes.
Were you born in Berlin?
No, I was born in a small village in Lusitania, which is like the far east, southeast corner of what was then the Soviet-occupied zone of Germany after World War II. In a small village. I mean, I moved from a small village to a town, to a bigger city, to Berlin, to Moscow, to New York, and now I'm sitting here outside of Atlanta.
So how did you get from Germany to America with the help of the Soviet Union? That in itself should be a book.
It is a book.
Oh.
Yeah, that's one for you. It is a book. It's also a podcast and could become a mini-series. So how I got here, I can give you the mechanics. I got on a plane in Moscow, flew to Belgrade. In Belgrade, I got on a train. I went to Vienna. From Vienna, I went to Rome. From Rome, I went to Mexico City. And then I wound up in Chicago, eventually New York. That's the mechanics. Now, that ought to give you an idea. Who travels that way?
Somebody who desperately wants to get to America.
Yes, or somebody who doesn't want to be traced back to the Soviet Union. Right?
Yes.
Because if you hop around like this, and oh, by the way, I changed identities. I traveled with different forged passports. I used altogether three, one Canadian and two West German.
Were you a spy?
Yes! Bing, bing, bing.
Okay. Wow. So, very fascinating. So tell me, how does one become a spy?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can only tell you my story because there's all kinds of different ways, and depending upon what they have in mind for you, there's just different ways to do, and depending upon which organization is recruiting you. I was KGB. The KGB, you could not apply to the KGB or to the Stasi. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have known where to go. The KGB didn't have offices where it was like a plate on it, that's KGB. So I was recruited like all the others, but they were looking for like extraordinary people. That doesn't mean better, but different. They were looking for people who could operate in quote unquote enemy territory completely autonomously, without being a member of a team, without having an advisor next to you, like you see in the movies. You know, they have the meetings and they talk about what next. Completely, making lots and lots of decisions on the spot, and hopefully making good decisions. And I have it on authority, and this came from a couple of interviews given by retired KGB generals, that they were literally scouring about to find this kind of talent. They screened several thousand people, and I qualified. They also were looking for people who with very well developed abilities to speak a foreign language, and sort of they hit the jackpot with me because I was able to show them that I could learn American English well enough to get away with a residual German accent in New York City. And, I came here, so maybe I can tell you my name now because it's, the legal name that I have now is Jack Barsky. Jack Barsky was a young man who passed away at the age of 11. We stole his identity. So I came to the United States saying, here, I'm Jack Barsky. I was born here in New Jersey. And, I had a little bit of a rough start. I worked in the country on a farm for many years and eventually tried to find out if I can make it in the big city. And that's how my backstory sort of, it's one of the key pieces of my backstory.
So you were a KGB spy working for the Russians in America?
That is correct. I was in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, and that's also, this is also provable because this is information that was smuggled out of the KGB archives. They trained and sent out 10 of us. I know only one other. I have no idea what happened with the other 8. They could be in witness protection program, or they could have aborted the mission. No idea. 10.
So I have to ask you this question. If you were a KGB spy working for the KGB,
yeah,
and you came to America,
yeah,
undercover,
yeah.
When did they find out that you were a spy? And
who was they? The FBI?
Americans. The Americans.
A long time later, I came in 78. In 88, I quit the KGB and sort of retired from the spying stuff and just lived my life as a normal American with a family, a house in the country, and so forth. 9 years later, the FBI said hello. And the reason that they knew about my past was that the fellow who smuggled out the information about the 10 of us, he was an archivist in the KGB archives. And at one point, he defected with several suitcases full of copied notes. And in those notes, there was a little bit of information about me, that there's a Jack Barsky living somewhere in the northeast of the United States who is an illegal KGB agent. And so then the FBI investigated me for 3 years until they finally said hello.
And when they said hello, what we hear in the press is that if you are caught being a spy, you are in a lot of trouble.
No, there was no press. This was all top secret still. When they heard that I was an illegal, and when they knew how long I had survived in the United States without being discovered, they knew what they had on hand was a highly trained agent. So they were very, very careful. They wanted to find out, is he still active? Is he still spying? Does he possibly run somebody in the U.S. government? Because there was at a time when there were two really bad cases of betrayal in the FBI and in the CIA. In both cases, the Robert Hanssen FBI and Aldrich Ames CIA did phenomenal amount of damage. And so they were concerned that I was somehow involved in all of this, and knowing that they were dealing with a really, really well-trained agent, they didn't want to, just like when you don't want to wake up the spider, you don't even pull at one end of the spider's web. So it was just a big surprise to me when they said hello, and it was a very friendly meeting.
Was it really friendly?
Oh, it was. Okay. So when you, and this is normal operating procedure for fundamentally all intelligence services, unless they're stupid. If you catch an enemy agent, the first thing is, let's see if we can turn him. He's more valuable to us. We don't want to. If we punish him, we get nothing out of him. Let's turn him. Now, since I was already retired, they decided that I would still be more valuable to counterintelligence, just telling them what I knew. I not whom I knew, because I didn't know anybody by name. They kept that from me, but I knew a lot of methods, procedures, and how the KGB operated in those days, understanding that the Russian intelligence services of today have inherited a lot of that. So, and you just, when you ask the FBI, so how come you didn't put him in jail? They would tell you outright what I just told you. I'm just repeating what they say. I had nothing to do with it. I just had to play ball and unpack everything I possibly knew, and also pass a lie detector test.
Wow. Tell me, what does it take to be a good spy?
Okay, so a good spy like me and operatives like the people that are out and operate, not the analysts. There are people that analyze the information that comes from the operatives. That is a different skill set. You have to be, number one, likable. You have to make friends easily. The Russians gave me, one of the books they gave me to read in Moscow was How to Make Friends and Influence People. Not bad, good idea. You have to be a real quick thinker and make decisions without thinking much, based on instinct on the spot. That sort of won't, come back and hit you in the back. So quick thinker. You had to believe in the cause that you are working for. I did not join because they paid me a lot of money. In fact, they didn't. I was a communist through and through. And, the best American spies are patriots. Otherwise you won't take that risk, right? One of the character traits that I like that was quoted as being important is called a well-controlled inclination for adventure. That you would have made a good spy too, because I know what you did. You traveled all over the place. You people like you, like that. They would help you everywhere, and you were adventurous. the ability, in my case, the ability to, be alone for a long period of time. No, I had no problem with that. Nowadays I do because, I've been married for a long time and I can't stand the idea of being in an empty house. And there were a few others that, not all of them I can remember, because I usually have a list that I read from. This list was actually given to a reporter by an KGB general. They were looking for people just like that. Also, you have to be able to really, really control your emotions well. Because if you act based on emotions, you're going to make mistakes, particularly the negative emotions, fear. And that's one other thing that was important. You have to be fundamentally fearless. I tell you, I am fundamentally fearless, but there's one person in this house who puts the fear in me, and that's my wife.
Well, how long have you been married?
This one is number 3. I wasn't afraid of the other 2, but this one, 12 years. She's Jamaican, and Jamaican women are really tough because they have to be, because their men treat them like you know what. So she has an emotional force that is bigger than mine, and mine isn't so. It's not underdeveloped. Let's put it this way.
Wow. Tell me, it's funny you said I would be a good spy, because I often think to myself that I would have liked to have been a spy. I'm not a spy, but if I was, I wouldn't tell you. But you probably you probably can see right through me. My next question is, what was the most dangerous situation you've ever been in, where you had to make a life or death decision, and you made the right decision? Because if you hadn't made that decision, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
To the extent I know, there was never a life and death decision. There could have been, and I'm not certain how close I came, because as you probably know, in the KGB did not treat defectors very nicely. They would, if they could, go after them and assassinate them. So it was in 1988 when they called me back based on, they had some idea that the FBI was about to arrest me, which was false, but they didn't know it at the time, and I didn't know it at the time. And I disobeyed that command, and I told him, I'm not coming. I'm not defecting, but I'm staying here. So now there was about 3 months of uncertainty as to, what would happen. And in those 3 months, I used my instincts and my spy training to make sure that I was not reliably to be found in a certain spot at a certain time. All right, so I would go to work and zigzag, take different trains, take buses, and leave the house at all different times and so forth. I also took some counter-surveillance, counter-espionage, which includes counter-surveillance measures to make sure that the FBI wasn't on my case. So I was in a situation where the danger was from both sides, and it all disappeared. There were a number of tricky situations where it was being caught or not being caught, jail or no jail, but nothing life and death where I faced the threat directly.
That you know of.
That I know of, correct. Okay. Because as you know, you can't prove a negative. You cannot exclude things that you don't know. Now, I had the good fortune of really getting to know a lot of background about my story that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been able to come out of the closet and reconnect with my past. For instance, I'm very good friends with the FBI agent who had the lead on my case. So he told me what it was like from his angle, right? He was also on 60 Minutes. And I was able to go back to Germany and reconnect with everybody who I left, except my mother, who had passed away, and my brother, who doesn't want to see me, but he's an odd bird. And so I know a lot about. I have almost an other person view of my life, which makes it rather interesting.
So what did he tell you about how they were tracking you?
Oh, he himself. I lived in the country, and across the street there was a hill. He would position himself there on that hill, and he would play a bird watcher. He had binoculars and a bird book next to him. So when occasionally some people walk by and they talk to him, well, I'm a bird watcher. Then the house next door came up for sale, so the FBI bought the house. And they took I got a closer look at me, just watching. They were just watching because they were afraid to do anything more aggressive. If I was still watchful and they would have been aggressive, they knew that I would have found out, and they were afraid that I might run. They didn't know until they watched long enough until this guy, Joe Riley, went to his bosses and said, listen, this guy is not active. He loves his children. He's got a problem with his wife. I am certain that when we apprehend him, he will just cooperate because he's got a family. And the guy was absolutely right. There was no hesitation on my part.
So I need to understand. You were in America, if my memory serves me correct, for about a decade as an active KGB spy.
That is correct.
And during that decade, you would send back information to the KGB.
Yeah.
What information were you sending back to the KGB?
Yeah, this is the one question that every time I answer it, I have to do some gymnastics because these hands never touched anything secret. These eyes never has seen a secret document. So let's just go first. Why it was important to the Russians, the Soviets, that I was here. Illegals played in the history of the KGB. Illegals, like people like me who just pretended to be somebody who they weren't. Because we were able to move around in the country. Ask the FBI, it's almost impossible to find an illegal. What are you looking for? You don't know. So, during the height of the Cold War, there were some periods of high tension when there was a possibility that all the diplomats, and at least half the diplomats in this country, the Soviets were all KGB, would be kicked out and vice versa. And then who was left? Us. 10 of us, maybe. And at one time, this was during the Reagan era, the KGB had an initiative that everybody, it was called Operation Ryan, that everybody who served in a foreign country, in a NATO country, was supposed to get a special task to look out for signs for preparation of war. All right, because the KGB and the leadership of the Soviet Union was reasonably sure that Ronald Reagan would start a war. It was just a matter of when. So that was number one. Number two, I was supposed to collect information with regard to foreign policy. Never got close to people who were decision makers in foreign policy or had were influencers. But at least I was able to, feedback Moscow how Americans responded to certain events on the international stage, such as one example, when the Korean airliner was shot down, which created a lot of tension. And then I the most active I was as a spotter. So here's how this works, in the KGB at least. In order to find and recruit an agent in a foreign country, there's three people involved: the spotter, the recruiter, and the handler. The spotter looks around for people, profiles people, and sends information back to the center. That may be handed over to a recruiter, and if the recruitment is successful, that will then be, and the agent will be run by a handler. The three don't know about one another. The three don't know what happened to the case. This is, the Russians were very good in compartmentalizing. So particularly when I went to college in the US, and I met quite a few college students who showed a lot of possibilities to get into, high-level positions later down, either in industry or even in government. So I have no idea to what extent I caused damage, and nobody will ever know.
You mentioned earlier that I believe you'd been on 60 Minutes.
Yes, sir.
What were you talking about on 60 Minutes? And apologies for these questions. Clearly, if I Googled you, I'd know, but I don't know.
Of course. So. No, it was something similar. It started out, it was the story of my life. It was two segments, because the story is just too complicated to squeeze into 15 minutes. And it's called The Spy Next Door, or something like that. And so there was this interview with me, this interview with my daughter, Chelsea. The twist in the whole story is that I left the KGB because I was in love with an 18-month-old child that I had here. It's my daughter. And so that makes the story just much more human, okay? And so they interviewed Chelsea, they interviewed Joe Riley, they interviewed a couple of other people. We went to Germany, and we talked to a couple of old friends. And so they packaged this up as like a short version of the book that I subsequently wrote, which is 320 pages. That show was repeated twice. So they made some money off of it, and I got, because they don't pay you. But it allowed me to, write the book. Oh, I got fired from my last job, by the way, after they found out that I was 60 Minutes. They were the board of directors. I worked for a company that had some secrecy requirements. They worked in the electric energy industry, and they were uncomfortable with having to explain how come they let an ex-KGB agent in. So I was able to write my book, and I'm now out there public speaking. We just released a podcast, and so life got really interesting, and I get to talk to you.
Do you know what I just realized? You, to the best of my knowledge, you are the only spy I've ever spoken to the best of my knowledge, because who knows, right?
Yes, that's correct. There's when I went public, there were several hundred people who knew me well that found out eventually that they were friends with a spy. The two companies that I had worked for, the last two companies, the Monday after the Sunday, no work was getting done. Yeah, no, you never know, and they don't have to be illegal either. They can just be operating under their own name, but they're cautious enough and careful enough that you think, well, they're journalists, they're students. The majority of spies are actually like that. And then you got the diplomats. If you meet a Russian diplomat, you just assume 50% chance that they're spies. And then that's why when Donald Trump met like naively with the Russian ambassador, whose first assignment was to be a diplomat at the United Nations, that was a big stupid mistake. Because he had KGB all over him.
Well, maybe Donald Trump didn't have the same wherewithal to determine who was a spy and who wasn't. But who knows?
Oh yeah, he didn't have very good advisors in the realm of foreign policy in the beginning. I don't want to pass judgment on the ex-president, but there was a naivete with which that team started out that was mind-boggling.
So let's backtrack a little bit. You talked about spy training.
Yeah.
Can you tell me some of the things that go into training a spy?
Yep.
Like, what are some of the things that you did?
Okay. Again, this is my training. I know only my ex-colleague, the other guy who did the same thing I did, who was trained the same way. Most training takes place in class-type settings, like the CIA training. They have like a boot camp in the beginning, and there's a lot of people drop out after that, and then they have classes and lectures and and they always train as a team. I was trained only one-on-one, simply because the moment I signed up with the KGB, my very existence became a state secret of the Soviet Union, right? So you didn't want to expose me to 24 other people, right? So what are you going? Where are you going? No. So most of the training I got was technical training, technical and overall what we call tradecraft. So let me start with the technical stuff. I had to learn how to receive Morse code. That took a while. It takes a while to, particularly, we were aiming for a certain speed. So, the ears need to get used to that. And encryption, I was taught a couple of algorithms. Each one lasted about 4 years. Algorithms that were specifically designed for me. Then I practiced receiving the Morse code over shortwave radio. And I learned how to produce secret writing. And I learned, I was an amateur photographer already, but I learned some things that you do with a camera that, with a regular camera, that were more useful to the KGB. And with the help of a microscope, I learned how to make a microdot. So a microdot is when you take a regular, full-size readable document, and you use the microscope in reverse. Instead of making things bigger, it makes things a lot smaller. And you burn that image onto the photo paper, and the dot becomes about as big as the head of a pin. And what you can do with that, you can put it under a postage stamp and mail a postcard. And the recipient just takes it off and enhances it, makes it bigger, enlarges it again, and voila. I never did it in real life, but I learned how to do it. Then I learned, the street type operations, counter surveillance. How do you find out that you're being followed? Other tricks I had to come up with myself, such as, how do you know that your apartment has been searched? They didn't teach me that. They knew I would come up with something. And I give you my favorite. My shortwave radio was, I placed this at a distance from the table that was always the same. So if somebody had picked it up and not put it back at the very same place, I would have known there was somebody in there. I also had a chest of drawers where the drawers, when you stood in front of it, you couldn't see whether the drawer was completely closed. So when I had the drawer like 8 millimeters open, you could only see this if you went down and looked at it. So if somebody opens it and closes it, so the first thing when I got to my home, I would measure the thing, 8 millimeters, all good. and I was 100% accurate because all of my counter intelligence measures yielded 0, and I wasn't being investigated. But that helps you to be, not questioning yourself and not get into panic. You're good, and so that training, particularly counter surveillance, took about a year in Moscow, off and on. I worked with some of the best, and we did a lot of practice runs. Their task was to follow me and not being discovered, and my task was to discover them. In the end, we did 10 of them, and the final score was me 10, they 0. I'm not sure if that was very good for their career, but...
How did being a spy help you understand human beings?
Now, that's a good question, and I think, and I absolutely know that I understand people as well as anybody. I have incredible empathy, but the empathy is intellectual. It's not emotional, because even before I was a spy, I always was curious about other people. I always wanted to know, what's in their head, what they're going to do next. And when I became a spy, that was absolutely critical. I had to know who I was interacting with, who I could tell what, how and who they were. I was also analyzing them with regard to, would they be good spy material? And I literally can tell you, so what happened now, over time, I have collected a huge database of character types in my brain that allow me to pretty much, with reasonable certainty, assess a new person, who they are, fundamentally who they are, thumbs up, thumbs down, and why not. I call this subconscious pattern recognition. That's I should trademark that. I invented that. It's like I sort of see the pattern. There's a lot of things you don't know. It's body language, facial expressions. You've been all over the world, even though the culture is different, but people are still very similar, aren't they?
They definitely are.
Yeah. So and this even my wife, who initially would fight me on this, she would yield eventually, because I occasionally, when she introduced a new friend, I said to her, no, this lady's no good, this guy's no good, and they were bad in both cases. I don't know if that's not a marketable skill, because you're going up against the big 5 consulting firms and all the people who claim that they know people, and they have they screen resumes and they know who people are, and not nonsense. I know better, but anybody can claim that.
Well, you know what? It seems what you're describing is just an intuition, an innate understanding of humanity that is innate to us all, yet most of us are not in touch with it.
Correct. But I think there is something also going on with the neurons without knowing it. The brain is a fantastic thing, and this thing has a mind of its own. It thinks about stuff that I don't want it to think about, right? But you're right. This is like what people call this gut instinct. There's something more to it than just thinking or feeling. And scientists now, very serious scientists, are in agreement that the mind is not the same as the brain, but they haven't really figured it out what it is.
So I have a question. You were born in 1952?
No, 49.
1949, same year as my mum. So you were born in 1949. This is a little bit of a kind of tangent, but you were born in post-war Germany.
Yeah.
Now, what are your memories of post-war Germany?
Okay, I have direct and indirect memories. The indirect ones are the ones that my mother would tell me as I was older and could understand this. The direct memories weren't bad. I just remember that I was the bad stuff. I was made to eat a lot of food that I didn't like. I do remember that first grade we went to school and we got school lunch, and that was horrendous stuff. I still remember the mashed potatoes and the spinach that they made the German way. That's like it's all ground up and it tasted horrible. We went to school with a little aluminum pot where they put the stuff in and you had a spoon and you were supposed to eat it. Occasionally we'd just dump it in the bushes. It was that bad. I remember like it was yesterday, and that was before I was probably still in kindergarten or maybe in first grade. Food was rationed until I was 10 years old. And one time my mother sent me to buy something, and the rationing stamps she had in a wallet, and I lost the wallet. It was a disaster. I don't know if they beat me, but it was worse than getting a beating because we knew we wouldn't be able to get food for a month. Thank God a neighbor found the wallet. I also remember that at night it was always cold because we didn't heat the room that we slept in, and so it was sub-freezing in the winter. And I also remember that there was an incredible, there was a feeling of community amongst the people because there was no TV. There wasn't a whole lot of things to do. So in the summertime, we had, I lived in a school building, but opposite the school building was a 3-story house with maybe 10 parties. In the summer, everybody would be outside and hang out. And some of that had probably had to do with dealing with Soviet occupation and the party and all that. I wasn't aware of any of that. But that community actually persisted to this day, but it was most visible when East Germany and West Germany united. The East Germans are much more sociable, and and that comes from that past. And they're not so much into individualism and so forth because, I grew up in a collective. I went from one collective to another, and now they want to put me in a collective in this country. That's not going to happen.
Do you think that your decision to become a KGB agent was in any way linked to your childhood and what you experienced as a kid? Yes.
Childhood, I forgot to tell you that we were bombarded with Marxist-Leninist theory from kindergarten on. It was fed us in kindergarten. It was obviously to be digested by children of that age, and then first grade and on and on and on. There was no other opinion allowed. That was the ultimate and complete cancel culture. You lived in that universe where only one truth was allowed. And when you get that from childhood on, you believe it. And I didn't have, since there were very few opportunities to hear some opinion to the contrary, I never heard it, and I wasn't seeking out another opinion. This was my truth. Okay, so that absolutely. And I also knew that when the KGB introduced themselves, I was still convinced that the Soviet Union was the greatest country ever and the biggest friend of us, and that I would help create the workers' paradise on earth.
Well, they say kids are sponges, right? And that's why
Yes.
These types of political organizations go after kids. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yes, and I tell you what, it is extremely difficult to get rid of an ideology that you absorbed as a child. I still see this in my contemporaries who stayed in East Germany and who were communists like me. They haven't been able to overcome this. There's at least a residue in some cases. They're still communists. It's very, very hard. You become a closed system and you don't let another truth in because it could hurt you.
Yes, absolutely. Look, man, we could be here forever, but I'm going to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What is it like going from being a communist to, I am assuming you've now become a capitalist?
I'm an anti-communist, and I think capitalism is a really lousy system, but it's the best we have. We're not managing this properly. When we got too many just single power centers that have too much power in the economy itself, but also then now in the realm of ideology. You see, the truth will set you free. And as I was able, after the wall came down, I was doing research. I said, what happened here? I mean, how was that possible? Me and the CIA, by the way, had the same question. And so I did research. And one other thing that makes you a good spy, you got to be curious. And that's in my nature. I'm very curious. So I did research and I found out what was all the stuff that was wrong in East Germany and the Soviet Union. It was eye-opening. And then I extended my research. I learned about the American system, and what absolutely made me a passionate American is a course that I took on the American Constitution, United States Constitution. So if you ask me today, when you ask me about party politics, I'm not a member of any party, but I am a conservative libertarian constitutionalist, and I'm sticking to it. This is the only way that I can see that liberty can be preserved and that people can achieve their full potential on their own with help when they need it.
Fascinating, truly. First of all, I mean, thank you very much for agreeing to chat with me. Like I said, I've never, to my knowledge, spoken to a spy. And I know why the producer put us in touch, because I'm curious. I'm fascinated by history. I'm fascinated by understanding people. I'm fascinated by everything that you've done in your life. So he chose well, and it's been an honor. Tell me again where you live.
I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. If you ever find yourself in LA, please let me know. And if I find myself in Georgia, I will let you know too.
I have two friends in LA. One would be a really good guest for you, because you're too young to know who she is. She's a fascinating person. I'm gonna ask her if she would want to appear on your show before I let your producer know. Yeah, don't tell me her name. No. Speak to the producer. It'd be great. And the company that is now investigating whether we're going to do a miniseries is also LA based. And I have occasionally been in LA to do some work in a studio, like most recently for the History Channel. There's a good chance that I'll show up one day. And allow me to say one more thing, because that is a sentence that I really want to get out. You, in that interview, I think it was with ABC, you said something, I paraphrased, that kindness is what makes the world go around and what holds the world together, something like that. I just want to add one thing. The mother of kindness is love. And people ask me a couple of times what I have learned from my life. And the first time the question was asked, I spontaneously came up with 3 words. And as phony and often misused these words are, they are absolutely true. Love conquers all. Indeed, it does. And the reason that I knew that I would like you is because you're thinking and feeling the same way I do. You might have a different belief system, but it doesn't matter. It's the humanity that connects us.
And I will say one more thing, and that is that one of the most powerful ways to feel love is through community.
Yes, sir.
And we have lost that on so many levels.
Exactly right.
And that's a very, very dangerous thing.
Yes. Well, if we lose community, we lose the essence of being human. So that was I knew it. It was probably the best interview I ever had, because you allowed me to opine.
It's my pleasure and my honor, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello everyone, it's Leon here, aka the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you